Wait for it. Wait for it, and we're live. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans. It's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just a couple of nerdy veterans, a Stabby Chaos Coordinator, and one Chief Shenanigator knitting in the corner, geeking out over our science
Crocheting.
fiction.
It's always crocheting.
But knitting sounds cooler.
No.
Anyway,
Go on. Keep
we're
going.
geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies, a place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast that puts the fun in dysfunction. So without further ado, we're going to let our guests introduce themselves to our listeners and viewers at home, starting with the one, the only Miss Charlie Cox.
Hello, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Charlie Cox. I write science fiction and military fantasy with a sense of humor because life can be dark. So let's embrace a little joy wherever we can find it. And I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, outstanding. They wrote a song about that. It's our old friend.
Which one?
Hello, darkness, my old friend. Life can be dark.
Yes. Yep. It's a great song.
I thought you set that up so perfectly. I thought I just hit it out of the park, but apparently swing and a miss. All right. Next. Yeah, I rolled a one. It happens. Next, we have the one, the only, the dwarf himself, Mr. Dave Handley.
Hi, so I'm sci-fi author Dave Handley. I write mostly for Canon Publishing these days, mostly in their Fallen Empire universe, and I am glad to be back in the Blasters and Blades rotation.
Yeah, freaking standing. You are my favorite midget, though, Dave. So I just want you to know that.
Hey,
it's hard being 3 apples tall.
Yeah, I mean, but you rock it. That beard, it makes it work for you. Yeah, we just need to get you like some braided beads in there just to add to the effects, and then maybe like an axe over your shoulder that you could put behind you, just
like
totally
a feather
into it. Yeah, we could do that. All right, next we have the one, the only Mr. James J.E. Pittman.
What's up, everybody? J. Pittman here. I write the Felix Chance series of books and the brand new Saint Germain letters, which spins off of Felix. I also write Pandora Squad, action, military, sci-fi. I write a little bit of horror. I write a little bit of everything, just because my brain won't shut up about certain ideas. So I'm happy to be here talking about myths and legends, because guess where I get a lot of my stuff for Felix?
The library?
Dun, dun, dun. That's right.
Because that's where you get all the cool books.
Legends in the library, yeah.
They do. All right. Do you have a favorite source for your myths and legends when you're looking for them?
Honestly, no, not really. Just kind of whatever strikes my fancy. I'll go look up some Bigfoot books. I'll go look up some Native American legends. I'll go look up some European folklore. Just kind of whatever I feel like mishmashing together in Felix verse.
Okay. All right. Next we have Miss Jana S. Brown, who sometimes cosplays as Jenna Ray.
Hi guys, I'm Jana S. Brown. I am the chief shenanigator around here. It's kind of halfway between being a cat herder and a den mom. Somewhere in all of that. And I write the weird and the wonderful with Smoochies. So we have science fiction, fantasy, urban fantasy, dabble in horror, dabble in mystery. If it's out there and the brain squirrels want to write about it, we write about it. And I'm crocheting in the corner because when it's knitting, I have 2 big sticks with points on them. One of these days I will have to introduce JR to that.
Pointy in first.
Yeah. I mean, the stabbing is how you show love on this podcast.
Hey, I played in a Call of Cthulhu game with a gal whose only weapons were knitting needles. She was playing somebody who was about 70 years old, and she went around and stabbed the monsters with her knitting needles. And, the GM said it was fair.
I seem to remember there was one of the action shows where that was what the lady kept like needles in her hair that looked like knitting needles to go for like a Japanese type look, but it was really
hair spikes.
Yeah, hair spikes.
It works. I've cosplayed the hair spikes.
Have you seen the murder sticks?
No, go on.
Yeah, so it's that idea. They're formed really, really sharp points, and you stick them in your hair, and they're made out of wood. So you can go on an airplane. They don't look like weapons. They're just hair sticks, but the brand name is Murder Sticks. They're really cool.
They will.
I mean, that's one way to make sure the vampires stay away.
Yep.
I don't know. They're a little thinner than a steak, but maybe.
I mean, it's wood, and that's what makes it a defining characteristic. But that's another podcast. So next we have the one, the only, the outlaw author himself, Mr. Jesse James Fain.
Hey, everybody. My name is Jesse James Fain. I do go by the Outlaw Author because the branding writes itself. I write stories focusing around martial tales that contain vengeance, loss, and or redemption. If you like the sound of heavy metal and the smell of gun smoke, you're going to like my stories.
Smokeless powder, but, you know, gun smoke sounds cooler. All right, and last...
There's not smokeless.
Well, it's also true, but...
As someone who's shot indoors, it's mostly smokeless.
I have had people come out of the woodworks. It's not technically gunpowder anymore, because actually, I'm like, oh my goodness, okay.
It's not cordite anymore. It's nitrocellulose powder, but it still actually has smoke.
So, well, technically, cordite is colloquially known as gunpowder, so it still kind of works, but people get pedantic about the weirdest things. Next, who's totally not pedantic, we have the one and the only Miss S.L. Linton.
Hello, it's so great to be back on here. I write fiction at odd angles, so sci-fi, horror, fantasy, blend of the two, anything weird. I like writing stories where there's some darkness, but there's light at the end of the tunnel, and I promise it's not a train. You can find my stuff over on Substack.
Outstanding. All right, so next we do have, before we dive into the topic, we do have to do the religion question, because we have rules here on the Lashes of Blaze podcast. We break them all the time, but we do have rules.
Well, we do have them. We have a list.
All right, so we are civilized human beings here at the Lashes of Blaze podcast. We are no longer knuckle-dragging troglodytes. So, coffee or tea, and how do you take it when you're drinking with a Sasquatch, Charlie?
I like my coffee with a lot of sugar and some half and half. And if it's cold outside, maybe a little dash of caramel to help make it feel more cozy. And my Sasquatch approves. Although his mate prefers tea. She has a special blend all her own.
I mean, do we allow that? I don't
Yes,
know.
we allow it.
Okay. I mean, they're big, so I guess you kind of have to.
Do you really
Yeah.
want to argue with a Sasquatch over whether or not
I
she can
don't.
have her tea any way she wants it?
Probably not. All right, next we have Dave. What are you drinking with your mythical friends?
Yeah, coffee. Coffee with some heavy cream. Dark roast. The darker, the better.
Okay. James, what would you and Chance drink if you were sitting next to, I don't know, Bigfoot?
Well, if you've read the books, you know Sassy has a wonderfully ramshackle house with amazing porches. So, of course, you have to have sun tea on the porches.
Oh, that's a rule, especially in the South.
Absolutely.
But we have lots of rules in the South. Like, he just needed killing is a valid excuse.
Yes.
Yeah,
He
I
looked
think
at
tries to
me
interrupt.
crossways.
What's that, Jesse?
I said he looked at me crossways.
Totally valid. Justifiable. Send him home, Your Honor. All right. Next, Jana. If you're sitting next to Nessie, what are you drinking with her? And yes,
Well,
I assume your gender.
Usually I am drinking my Diet Dr. Pepper because I love it very, very much. But the other day on one of the very, very many message boards that we use, we were talking about which was the ultimate root beer. And so my
Yes.
daughter and I had to go and pull out the bottles of Dad's root beer because that is our very, very favorite root beer. So this week we've been drinking Dad's root beer, and we still think that it is a very good ultimate root beer.
So I know people that are fanatical about this is the best, and so it's fun to get the name brands you can get for root beers at like the grocery store, and then buy some of the more unique brands. You can get them at like the Old Country store at a Cracker Barrel, and then do blind taste tests and see if they can actually taste what they think they can. And 9 times out of 10, people get it wrong.
Yeah, we have a place up here called Pyrodos, and they import all sorts of bizarre stuff, and their room full of sodas and stuff is just amazing. There's probably 40 different varieties of root beer in there. So we have done let's pull all the different types of root beer and have people taste test them. And we didn't come down to a favorite, but gosh, we had a lot that were yummy.
All right, Jesse, what are you drinking after you get done wrestling the Chupacabra, and what is he drinking with you?
Oh, well, man, stories that haven't come out yet. Chupacabra packs are their own special little thing. But that being said, hot chocolate. I'm definitely a hot chocolate guy. You put a little spice in it, a little pepper in it. That'll make Chupacabra happy, and you're all set.
I kind of picture the Chupacabra wanting a little bit of liquid courage added into theirs.
Yeah, well, I try not to always answer with Georgia sipping cream, so
That's fair. That's fair. And lastly, Miss S.L. Linton, since you've got Bigfoot behind you, I'm going to ask you, what are you drinking if you're sitting next to Bigfoot and you're sharing?
Probably black coffee. Dark roast is my favorite too. Or if he prefers tea, black tea with a little sugar and some cream.
Okay. All right. Depending on the weather, but I've been partial to sun tea lately for some reason, so I'm with you. That's an excellent answer. So, all righty. So before we get started and we define our terms, I'm going to knock the commercial out so we don't have to get interrupted again till the end once we start pontificating on the topic of all things mythical and legendary. So with that, I am going to roll that beautiful bean footage.
From darkness to destiny, Layla awaits. Blinded by fate, Eric awakens to a new life on a remote farm, cared for by the enigmatic mute Layla. As secrets unravel and adventures call, can love conquer the shadows? This gripping fantasy, unearthed from antiquity, delivers pulse-pounding action, divine interventions, and timeless themes of worth and courage. Layla, available on Amazon. Ignite your imagination today.
Hey, we recognize that voice. All right. So today we've got to do the definition in two parts because we said myth and legends and speculative fiction. So what is a myth? A traditional, often sacred narrative, usually of unknown origin, that explains natural phenomenon, cosmic origins, or cultural rituals through the actions of gods, goddesses, or supernatural beings. Is everyone cool with that definition I stole from Wikipedia?
Yeah.
Why not?
I like that.
All right.
Close enough.
And then for a legend, also stole from Wikipedia because it's just agreed upon source that's easy to get for most things. I realize they're not always accurate on all things, but they do link to their sources so you can follow the link tree and do your own research. But a legend, a traditional popular story from the past that is believed to be based on historical fact but cannot be verified. Everyone good with that definition?
Yeah.
Close enough. I mean, there's a lot of heroic symbolism in there and the larger-than-life heroes and that kind of thing that tend to be more typical with legend and folklore, but it's a decent starting place.
I don't know if there's some legends that persist that we know aren't true. So I'm not sure if, but we don't have to argue about that. It's close enough. But I think that legends just sometimes stick because of the power of the message instead of us actually believing it might have really happened.
Or maybe it's because people want to believe it happened, even if they know that it probably didn't.
Yep.
Go on. Why do you think they persist then? If we know they didn't happen?
Well, it's a line that I like that I want to steal from probably one of my favorite movies, The Secondhand Lions, where Robert Duvall's giving this talk to the kid that he gives every young man, right? And he tells him, like, there's some things that a man should believe in, even if he can't believe, even if you can't prove they're true. Money and power mean nothing. Honor and courage mean everything. True love
Good
never
conquers
dies.
evil.
Those things are the things a man should believe in, whether they're true or not. And so I think that we assign that value to certain things in legend because we want them to be true, because we need them to be true, at least culturally, on some level.
Yeah, that makes sense. The morality and the lesson behind the story lives on, even if the story itself isn't entirely truthful.
And I think sometimes it's we want them to be true, and sometimes we're a little afraid that they're true. Because that's always the other side of myths and legends is sometimes they're very inspiring, heroic stories, things that we look and say, this is something we want to live up to. And other times they're the things that tell you what you shouldn't be doing or what are the dangers of the way that humanity evolves or of things that happen. And so
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
that other side that is the, it's the John Henry side of can you beat the machine, and if you do you die? What is the price of progress? Do I want that to be true? Maybe not necessarily, but it is something that we have to think about is what is the price of progress? That's why it's a great legend.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that the other, like when you're talking about the darker side of both myth and legend, is that, that there really are, bad things that lurk in the shadows.
Mm-hmm.
The legend serves a purpose of passing on, if not specific, explicit knowledge that keeps you alive, the idea that there's stuff out there that will stomp you flat and eat your hat that you don't understand.
Yeah, what you meet at a crossroads is not always a good thing.
Right.
And you have rules. You have rules that say this is how you deal with, and we see this in both myth and legend of, if you want to not piss off the gods, then here are things that you need to do or can't do, or sometimes they're just capricious and screw you. Because
Now,
we get that a lot with the Greeks, where it's just, nope, they're just feeling capricious today, so too bad. Go ahead, Jer.
do you think that the myths and the legends change or evolve over time, or do you think they have to be static and set?
I think they have to evolve because myths and legends reflect the people who tell the story and what they need to hear. And so they would, I think, change from teller to teller depending on what is emphasized and what the audience needs to hear or what the audience is willing to hear.
Especially considering that most of our traditions were passed on orally before humans ever picked up a rock and carved into a cave. So those stories naturally would have changed and evolved over time because details would change or wouldn't be remembered the same, or somebody would embellish something. So generation by generation, the stories would naturally be altered slightly.
Well, I think that they certainly change even when we can sit down and write a record. I mean, look at the Arthurian legend, right?
Yep.
Like Arthur was likely some military guy that survived the fall of Rome and their exodus from Britain that kind of held crap together for a while. And that has evolved, multiple iterations over time, depending on who has their hands on the tale and are telling it. If you're Sir Thomas Malory, you're telling a very different story than, the people who were telling the oral tale of, Artorius or whatever his name might have been, on the tail end of Rome getting out of Britain.
That's what happens when you let the bloody French get a hold of your stories. So, that's rule one right there. Don't let that happen. But to add to that point, they have to evolve over time because language evolves over time, because people evolve over time, because some stories are so enduring, they hearken all the way back to history that we don't have recorded. There's things going on with archaeology right now that they're trying to figure out where artifacts came from that we can't explain with modern technology. And there's all these stories of the flood and what happened with the flood. But as we learn more through history, we're going to learn more about what happened. And then the stories that we can tell are going to change. So as we know more or less, those things change. As history goes on, as more people get a hold of the story, as the bloody French invade and change your entire language, then things go things just end up different.
Got a little bit of a chip there?
Maybe. Me and William the Conqueror might go rounds if I ever find a time machine. It's okay.
I would help with that. Godwinson should have won. I'm
But
mad
the other
about it.
one of the other interesting things is how format changes the story. Because we talk about oral traditions, written traditions. Well, now we're in a time as we start to kind of bring the conversation to how this connects with our speculative fiction, where we have movies about these various myths, and sometimes they are the myth just right out, and sometimes they're wearing a different guise, and sometimes you've got to take something very, very, very long and try to squish all the salient parts into a 2-hour movie. There's one on the Odyssey that's about to come out, and they did Epic the Musical. And doing the tale of the Odyssey in a musical format is also a very, very different thing. And there's some things there that they sanitized or alluded to in such a way that, my almost 13-year-old daughter has listened to the whole thing multiple times, and she doesn't know a lot of the bits that I'm okay if she doesn't know until she's in like college, because it's like, yeah, some of that's a lot much for a 13-year-old. So it's also, as we go through those different things, how we present them to the audience and which audience they are. And then as that audience grows up, how they experience it differently. And again, the different formats. Is it an animated cartoon? Is it a movie? Is it in a video game? These things change the way we can do our telling.
Are you? Would you consider things like the Odyssey and the Iliad to be a legend?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is one of the ones that for modern readers, listeners, whatever, they actually had a lady that created a YouTube channel where she basically turned it into a song, and she did it like chapter by chapter and then totally published it. My niece was listening to it.
Yeah.
And
That's
suddenly
cool.
was super interested in the Odyssey and the Iliad because this lady was singing about it.
Epic the Musical is amazing. It is full cast musical theater, and it is really, really well done.
I don't know if that was before or after what this lady she found on YouTube was doing.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it started there, but it's big now, and yeah, it brings an interest that a lot of people did not have before, but they listen to it as a musical and they go, oh wait, hang on.
So like I read Beowulf as the epic poem it was written as in college and in high school, both in somewhat the original form and regular. Then later people started reading it in the abridged sort of Americanized English version. Now they've got animated cartoons about the story of Beowulf. Like the medium we do engage with the content does change. I do wonder if that changes the way we tell the story though, because sometimes the trend is to make the good guys the bad guys and vice versa. And suddenly the myth is different. The legend is different.
Well,
and is it a good thing?
I'll give an example that goes super far back. Hamlet. The story of Hamlet. I don't know if anybody watched The Northman, but The Northman is based off the legend that Hamlet is based off of. So Shakespeare hears this old Viking legend from back before he was even around, writes his play about it. Then his play about it gets remade how many thousands of times? We have Sons of Anarchy, we have The Lion King, we have 8 billion different examples that's basically Hamlet, but we used this instead. And that can happen with any kind of myth or legend as well. And Hamlet may well be history. There may have been a prince who had to go through revenging his father, but his father wasn't really his father, and all kinds of other nonsense happened. That very well, that whole story could be real. But now it's been turned into a story so many different times, who knows what's true and what's not.
Yeah, the template of a legend and a myth is often reimagined for inspiration, largely because it's so old no one can sue you.
Yep.
Yeah, another thing that happens with them, like Jesse was talking about with the origin of Hamlet, and like Hensley alluded to with Arthur, it's, the first appearance of Arthur written was Welsh. The legends take it combined with a Roman lost Roman soldier,
Centurion.
Lost centurion, and it just progresses from Welsh to English to the French, as Jesse is so got a chip on his shoulder about, to modern day. Same thing with like Robin Hood. Robin Hood was a Welsh folk hero. The English got a hold of it, and he became Robin Locksley. And then he became a crusader, and then it just translated throughout the different languages and regions. So it takes the same idea of the heroes and just puts them in a new cultural context. Same thing with the original Hamlet and the Norse mythology, and moving into Shakespearean English to the Lion King. Same bones of the legend, but told through various cultural lenses.
Okay.
And I
Charlie.
think that goes to the theory that there's nothing new under the sun, that most stories now are just retellings or slight variations of existing stories from hundreds and thousands of years ago. But you were going to ask me something else.
No, I was just saying you've been quiet, so I was going to ask if you had some thoughts, and then you shared them, so it worked.
Perfect timing.
Sometimes I get it right on accident.
I think that kind of wanders into some of Joseph Campbell's territory, right? With the monomyth. Like, that dude went way down the rabbit hole with a lot of cultures and a lot of their myths and legends, and come up with, hey, we're all basically telling the same, the same basic story. If you strip out the names and the dates and the places, you get kind of the same cycle, and that, George Lucas, famously copied and pasted that straight into, the first 3 Star Wars movies.
Right.
Okay. Why do you think the story endures to the point where we're telling it in speculative fiction, sometimes in a galaxy far, far away? Or as Dave would say, in space.
There are. Go ahead, Charlie. I'll tag in after you.
Okay. Well, I think that those of us who are storytellers, we get our inspiration subconsciously. So I couldn't tell you directly where I got an idea for X, Y, or Z. Things just come to me and, ooh, that's kind of cool. I want to play with that. And then I'll research it and I'll find information on, Sasquatch, Wendigo, whatever, and incorporate that into my story. But the story starts from somewhere else. But I can't consciously say that at this moment in time, I remembered this one specific thing and decided right then and there I was going to write a story. That's not how my brain works. It's completely subconscious. And so I'm just taking this piece and that piece and this piece, throwing them all in a blender and seeing what I can come up with.
Well, and to tag in on that a little bit, there are undeniable pieces of the human experience that make good stories. And I don't care who you are, where you come from, what your civilization is like. Love, loss, redemption, vengeance, violence, sex, music, drugs, all of these things are ingrained into the human condition. When you take the filters off, when you stop looking at it from some kind of morality lens, every society struggles with these things. They struggle with honor and strength and what these words mean and what it means to experience them. And the good legends, I say good as far as like legends that really resonate, they contain one or more of these subjects covered heavily. And that becomes a universal thing that you're going to run into. When people ask me what I write, I don't like to talk about genre. I write almost every genre, but I write a lot of the same themes. And that's because they're quintessential to our lives, to what it means to be human. And legends and myths are the center of our stories around how to live life, what it means to deal with these emotions, how to process them. They're a core to that. That's why people have a Bible, and why all these ancient pantheons survive, is because their stories were meant to guide.
I can boil it down even further. Popularity endures. People look back and think about literature and great literature. No, literature is popular fiction. Literature is what endures. The stories that endure, the ones that we go, Grandpa, tell me that story again and again and again, are the ones that get passed down. It's that same format. It has distilled into that structure. There's something about it. We can debate all day what, as Jesse says, resonates with us, what themes, what elements, whatever resonate with us, but they endure because they are popular, because people like them, they engage with them, and the successful ones get passed on. The successful ones get emulated. If anybody wants to make a living telling stories, they emulate the ones that people like to hear. There are, as we've seen, millions of different ways to tell a story. The ones that survive are the ones that people like. The ones that get passed on into stereotypes, into the annals of history, are the ones people like to tell again and again and like to hear over and over again. Going back to the Iliad and the Odyssey, it was an oral tradition. It was an epic poem that was recited, much like Epic the Musical, just in a lyrical way. People like to hear it, and it would, be passed down. So when you have the monomyth and Joseph Campbell, it's because that format was easily digestible and popular. That's the core behind these things. They were popular, so they were easy to remember because you heard them time and time again.
That is how you start fights in an English department. You tell them there's no such thing as proper literature. It was all just the popular stuff that survived.
Bring it. I've done this any number of times with any number of English teachers.
I think it's more than popularity, though. I think it's stories that resonate. Like Leonidas at the Hot Gates. That's not that doesn't have the bones of popularity. Like, everybody dies. It's tragic, as tragic can be, except that it resonates because it's one guy or a group of guys standing in front of impossible odds and saying, nope, not this far and no further. You're not getting past us until you kill us, and we're going to make you pay for every inch of ground. And that story resonates across every culture.
Isn't it?
Every culture has one of those stories.
Isn't it resonant because it's popular with a certain segment of people?
I don't know if it's because it's popular or because it.
I'm not talking about like blockbuster level popularity. I'm talking about there are certain people who it really resonates with, and who they love that particular story over, and to hear that story over and over again told however you're going to tell it. It doesn't have to be the mass appeal. It just has to be resonant enough with a large enough population to stand the test of time.
I think that holds up. I think that holds up, and it accounts for the fact that some of the literature that is enduring, even though it's straight garbage, endures because of that. Great Expectation and the Scarlet Letter don't continue to exist because they're good and people enjoy reading them. They continue to exist because academia will not let them go.
No, Scarlet Letter was a good moral lesson, and it wasn't a bad story.
I don't care about the moral lesson. That was the worst book I've ever read in my life.
But that's also hitting on the idea that people have to like the stories, because there is that other side of it, that we tell cautionary tales, we tell morality tales, we tell creation tales. There are answers and parts of society that these are answering. And so it's not just the stuff people like that get told over and over again. Sometimes it's the stuff that society, culture, wherever it is, feels like needs to be impressed upon them. The Scarlet Letter is a big thing because of what it's telling you about that society, about their morals, about all those other kinds of things. And yes, I was an English major, so I do like this particular fight, which I will not go too deep into because we are going to be on time. That's one of my jobs with the whole Chief Shenanigator thing, is to count time for us. But so there's a lot of things that myths and legends answer, and some of it is cautionary, and some of it is here and no further. It's the teaching people to be heroic, teaching people to draw a line in the sand, and it's okay to say, no, you move. And then some of it is asking those questions. Who are we? Where did we come from? Where are we going? All of those things go across cultures. We ask those questions, and every culture answers them a little bit differently. And SL has something to say because she was making fun hand motions.
Yeah, I was like, I'm in class again. I'm going to raise my hand. No, I was thinking also another aspect of this is culture and national national pride or nationalism in a way. It's a story is so deeply tied to a specific place that it forms part of the identity of the people there. So an example that pops to head, even though I might trigger Jesse over here, Charlemagne for the French, or Arthur for Britain.
Hold on. Jesse, do we need to do an intervention? Do you need a moment in a safe space to calm down? Are you going to be okay?
No, I'm totally fine.
There for you. You can hug.
Charlemagne was Frankish, not French. It's okay.
Well,
I like
okay.
Charlemagne. Keep going, Ezra.
Okay, or bring it down even smaller. The story of the headless horseman up in the Sleepy Hollow area. Sleepy Hollow is an actual place, and they've really tied that story to the town. Like if you go up there in October, you will encounter a headless horseman. I think that's their school mascot too. So I think it's also, it has a lot to do with culture identity and personal identity, and things like that, like the Jersey Devil. Of course, now I'm getting into cryptids. The Jersey Devil up in New Jersey. I mentioned that to a New Jerseyan once, and he was just so excited that I knew about the New Jersey Devil. So it's just, I think that's a big component of it too.
So to answer your question, Jana, it's not just popularity on the listener's side, it's popularity on the teller's side. I want to convey this message. Here's a good story to tell it with. It goes in both directions, in my opinion.
Indeed.
I would say, to push back, I mean, popularity is a relative term. What does make it popular? I do think there is value in the lesson, in the message too. And I'm not talking message fic where they preach at you, right? Like, I'm talking about just like the moral lesson. So if you read the book Hell's Gate, I think it's called, the one about the 300 training at the Agoge.
Gates of Fire.
Gates of Fire.
Yeah.
There we go. Like that one teaches you, because I read that in ROTC in college. It's about endurance. It's about persevering, because at the end it's something better that that's worth suffering for. Sometimes to get those messages out, maybe the medium that's transcribing those messages isn't perfect, but it perfectly portrays the lesson, which is why I think the Scarlet Letter endures. But I also think language evolves. If you look at a book that was written in the 80s versus a book that was written in the 90s, just watch the evolution of David Weber's writing compared to modern military science fiction. Like, the way people write evolves. What they expect from their reading evolves. And so sometimes what people don't like about the story is that the language didn't keep up with the time because they're reading the original version. I would hazard a guess with some of those stories people didn't like, if they read something in modern prose, they might actually like it.
Mm-hmm.
Because the story
that's bringing those things forward.
Right.
David Kimmel did a beautiful job of that in more than one of his books in the Draenei series. Like he basically took the Horatius at the bridge and Leonidas at the Hot Gates and squished that into a guy named Druss, and then kills him. Like the titular character dies on the walls of Dros Delnoch, which is not something that you typically see done in book one of a series. But he does it, and does it, did it beautifully. But again, that was a late 80s, early 90s, fantasy novel.
I think if you want an example of stories that are pushed because the lesson is worth teaching, just look at what the military puts out for their officers for the suggested reading list, and it's a lot of that. And maybe the prose aren't the best because they're dated. There's a reason we still read Marcus Aurelius' Stoicism, but his stoics are not. He's not writing in modern, English, shall we say? So I do think there's a distinction in the way the verbiage the story is told and the story itself, and you have to separate those two when you go to something so old. When you're talking about myths and legends that endure in the physical print medium. I know people that didn't enjoy reading the Iliad or the Odyssey because of the formatting, but then they watched the claymation movie and had no problem with it. Right, even as hokey as that was it the 70s they made that movie?
Yeah, it was awesome. Clash of the Titans.
I mean, I loved it too, but I'm just like, I do think the venue you tell the story makes a difference in how it's perceived by modern audiences. So it is important, I think, to separate the two. But we've harped on that enough, so we'll move on because I don't want Jesse to have a heart attack about the Scarlet Letter. So
yes, now we know how to torture Jesse going forward. We just, wave a copy of the Scarlet Letter in his general direction.
So
the cover's fine. No, the cover's fine. Just don't open it up and start reading it, and I might have to leave.
So
just read it in a French accent.
Yeah.
Harsh.
All right, so we've talked about why the stories endure, what the stories are. Let's talk about how they appear in speculative fiction. Do you think the way they're used in fantasy is different than the way they're used in urban fantasy versus science fiction? Do you think the medium, the genre, changes how they're reimagined and when they're being retold or used as inspiration?
I think it almost has to.
It does.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I think it does because in different genres, you might want to emphasize a different aspect of the story. Whereas, let's say you're doing a retelling of Arthur, you might in fantasy lean more heavily on the mystical and like the Lady of the Lake and Merlin and whatnot. But if you were to retell that story as maybe like a sci-fi, you might lean more on the militaristic side of it. And make it more about people trying to recover after the collapse of an empire, and what does that look like? And so you have this Arthurian sort of figure who arises to protect and unite their people. So I think it does the genre does affect the retelling.
Yeah, but the retelling did give you some really good lines, like the Lady of the Lake is a horrible way to pick a government, which was Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. I probably butchered the pronunciation of that last name, but anyway.
Monty Python did it first.
Did he? Okay.
Yeah, what retards lying around in pools distributing swords is no way to choose a government.
Yep.
Look, if I went around saying I was an emperor because some moistened fink had lobbed a scimitar at me, they'd lock me away.
It's the violence inherent in the system.
Oh, there's another movie we need to add to our list because doing a retro movie review on Monty Python could be really, really funny.
Gotta do Life of Brian.
Oh, Life of Brian, we could too.
All right,
but anyway, back to the question. We'll be good. For me, all of the genre and that trappings and that kind of stuff, they're trappings. They're the outside bit because really what we boil down to it is what's the story that we're telling. And then like SL says, then maybe we're going to emphasize different angles of it depending on where we are, but we're still coming to that heart of the story. Here's the man who's going to come back and save his people who, get Camelot 3000, which is a science fiction Arthur, but all of the key characters and the key moments and those key struggles, they come back out. Hamlet is still Hamlet when it's the Lion King, even though it's an animated cartoon with lions and monkeys and various other things. So there's set dressing that we change, but the idea that we're retelling is we're taking those really important characters, those really important concepts from the myths, and then we're applying other things to it. Well,
and honestly, sometimes the shift can help. What instantly comes to mind to me is I had a copy of Dante's Inferno that was updated, and it had pictures of like modern junkie cities, and everything had been changed to basically just be updated as far as who the celebrities were and what the surroundings looked like. It was absolutely fantastic. Or another one I'll point to is I think it was 96, but it's that era, the 90s era of Romeo and Juliet with Leonardo DiCaprio. With the old words, it was still the original lines. It was the original Shakespeare lines. But there's lines in Shakespeare that if you don't understand that version of English, you don't get the joke or what they're talking about. But having that visual reference with the classic lines teaches the viewer what, oh, that's what they were talking about. Like, oh no, that was a dirty joke. I didn't realize that was a dirty joke just reading it in high school. Like things like that, they can really help. And I'll stand up for that movie all day.
That's because there's the language shift from late Middle English to modern English that
Modern
loses some. It says some of the jokes were funny because they were lyrical, and you lost that in the translation.
Yep.
So
combining the two is cool.
Yeah.
Also, some of the words would, because of the meter, the words would have been pronounced perhaps in a slightly different way, and you wouldn't know that until you read it out loud.
Yeah.
And so it's that meter in Shakespeare that really matters.
No, Shakespeare's just full of dick and fart jokes and have been lost in history for the most part. Shakespeare is one of the most lowbrow humor that has been elevated.
And when you read when they found his house and they found his pipe and it was loaded with the wacky tobacco, you understand a lot more about his jokes. I'm just going to throw it. I'm just saying.
And Midsummer Night's Dream.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense now, doesn't it? So do you think, like, how does that functionally look different, though, if you set it in space instead? Do you think the beats have to change, for instance, for, insert random story? Or can you keep the beats and just change the set dressing like Jesse talked about with Shakespeare, but, Leonardo DiCaprio and, I think Los Angeles is where they filmed it.
I think that would depend on the soul of the story. Yeah. I mean, the story and the myth and the legend and the lesson that you're trying to tell, it really doesn't matter if it's an urban fantasy or an epic fantasy or a science fiction or a Western for that matter. The story itself is the story itself. The direction that you choose to take, the setting you put it in, the costumes that you put your characters in shouldn't really affect the soul of the story, in my opinion.
Well, Babylon 5 proved that. They did an Arthurian episode where there's a character who's kind of lost his mind and he thinks he's a knight straight out of Arthurian legend, and he behaves that way all the way through the episode of the show. And it, like, the set's different, but the way that guy behaves in the story is exactly the same.
And it's not even just his behavior in that episode. They also link the wound that doesn't want to close or doesn't want to heal properly motif in that, but instead of a physical wound, it's a wound of the mind.
Mm-hmm.
And also how in they link the final battle happens because one of the knights strikes a serpent on the field and no one notices the serpent, the asp, and they link it to how the original war started because that man had given the order to shoot at the Minbari ship.
Yeah. Because
they mistook what was a sign of respect as aggression. And so they really, it wasn't only just how he acted, but they pulled in a lot of the themes that, honestly, if you didn't know the story of King Arthur, you wouldn't necessarily be able to fully follow it. And I thought that I love Babylon 5, and that was one of my favorite episodes. It's such a good episode.
Okay.
Well, and it's interesting that sometimes what we're bringing is the entire story. We're telling Hamlet in space or whatever. Sometimes what we're doing is we are stealing bits and pieces from classical tales. Maybe you don't have enough time to do the entire Odyssey, but who hasn't stuffed a Trojan horse in some story? To go the thing that is not what it actually, or a Trojan bunny, going back to the Holy Grail, where you take something and it's disguised as something else and actually it's a weapon. That's a thing. And so sometimes we will grab bits and pieces from these classic things and then we bring them together. And I'm thinking urban fantasy, we do this all the time, where it's like, what mythical creature do we want to have our main character face off with? And okay, this is how I am going to take the werewolf and I'm going to twist it from my own urban fantasy world, but I'm still taking the bones of what is a werewolf expected to be because of the myths and the legends that it starts out with. And we see that, like I say, urban fantasy does it all the time. Alana Andrews in a Kate Daniels series, they do a whole bunch with ancient Babylon. And the mythology they pull out of there and then apply to their post-apocalyptic Atlanta and the people that they're fighting is fascinating, because that's not one that gets pulled through very often. It's not nearly as common, but I love seeing people do that, where you go, okay, I can actually kind of see this came from this classical Greek thing, but they've taken just this one little part, this one creature, this one little arc of story instead of the whole arc. So sometimes we're, redoing all of it, but sometimes we're just picking and choosing our favorite parts and shoving it all together. And that's kind of fun too.
No, I'm definitely guilty of that. Like I have a story where Baba Yaga comes to live in Key West.
Nice.
Like he's the grandson of Baba Yaga. He lives in an Airstream trailer with chicken feed. It's got a mind of its own.
Well, I'd read that all day.
I love it.
Okay. Do you think that it has to, in order for it to be done well, it has to be so in your face that they know? So, for instance, you mentioned The Lion King. I just watched it as The Lion King. I didn't realize there was any symbology there tying back to anything else. It was just a story of the lion. Does it have to be so in your face that it's obvious that's what someone's doing for it to work, or can it work if you're more subtle with it?
I think that's the perfect case in point where it can work if you're more subtle with it. No one in the intended audience knew Lion King was Hamlet. They made it for children. The adults probably picked up on it, but if the kids had heard Hamlet, they didn't know it and they didn't apply it to what they were watching in that animated film. I think it works beautifully when you're super subtle about it, and then maybe even years later people have that, oh wow, I see what they did moment. If the core of the story is strong and it has endured the test of time, as so many of these have, then if you adapt it appropriately, no one's going to notice. They're just going to enjoy the story, and then maybe later start drawing the parallels when they think about it on the 10th or 100th viewing.
Yeah,
I also know that if you're looking for things, you can find it. So I know people, when Gladiator came out, was the movie about the gladiators. It's like, oh, this is totally Christian symbology. I'm like, no, it's a story about a gladiator, quasi stolen from historic. But they wanted to find Bible teachings in everything, so they did. And that's not to say you can't find moral lessons in everything. That I absolutely agree with. But when you're looking for things, sometimes you can find it. And so there is a danger, I think, if it's subtle, people saying it's there and they just want it to be there. And that's where with any fiction, it's as much what the reader or the consumer brings to the table as what the creator brought as well.
I always love it when readers inform me that my book was about thus and such. The ecological message in that love story. And I'm like, there really wasn't much of an ecological. Well, okay, as long as it makes you happy, I'm good with that. And sometimes the curtains are just blue.
Yeah, I was about to say,
sometimes
that's an entirely
it's a story
different
about a
panel
dude and a fish.
Well, we lost all of that, guys.
Sorry.
I said sometimes, like said, the curtains are just blue. That's an entirely different panel about author intent.
And
Yes.
I think something that could be lost too if it's too in your face, because then that's all you see. You don't see anything more subtle as far as meaning that you're trying to do behind it. Sometimes if the trope or the element is too loud and too big, then people are thinking about what they know of that particular legend, and not what you're trying to say with that legend, if that makes sense.
Well, and I think it's a good trick that we use or can use is to take the legend and really, it's a bit of misdirection. Like you show them the thing, like a lot of the characteristics of the thing you want them to think that it is. And then when you do the reveal, it's not that thing. And so you can, you really hang your hat on, holy crap, this is, these are Tommy knockers. And then, oh no, they're zombie Tommy knockers. What the hell is wrong with this guy?
Yeah.
Pride, Prejudice, and Zombies was pretty awesome. I'm not going to lie.
I loved it as well.
I couldn't stand how his leather kept squeaking with every single step. And I just kept wondering how much like baby powder they had to use. And it was really distracting the entire movie. I couldn't. I love the book, but the movie was.
One of my favorites of recent years with that would be a comic series called Once and Future. It originally started with Once and Future King, obviously, but it brought in like all of English literature. What they had done was the legends came to life, and you had this secret organization that was trying to fight against the legends. So they brought in, various versions of Arthur that had, transliterated through different cultures. You occasionally had Beowulf or the Green Knight or any of the other suitable things. One of my favorite things was just the subtle throw in of the questing beast as it went through. But they wove all of these literary references into a unique story, because what you had to do, this organization had to be familiar with these literary references in order to work themselves into the story and then resolve the story by the internal logic of that world as it was applied to actual reality. So you had to rely on what you knew about, the audience knew about these stories, but also bring in some little subtle thing that was able to let them twist it around and resolve. It was very fun, very well put together, very well thought out. I highly recommend you read that series.
Okay. Well, since I think we're coming up to the hour, does anybody have any closing thoughts? And then if there's room for more discussions, we can always bring the panel back for a round two.
Oh, I was just going to say that myths and legends for me are just such a fun place to gain inspiration and take some stories and turn them on their heads and just have fun with writing something new that borrows themes from other places.
Yep. And I would add that you can't borrow until you know the original. And I feel like that's really important, that if you see something from a myth or legend set that you really love, if you really love Mjolnir or how, maybe Zeus or the idea of a thunder god or whatever, go back to those myths and start from there, and it will lead you down a wonderful path and inspire your own creativities and whatever you do in your life.
Yeah, definitely.
They're also rich ground to pull from. A lot of people, we've talked a lot about Arthur, we've talked a lot about Shakespeare, we've talked a lot about the low-hanging fruit, as it were, stuff that is very well known. But if you go deeper into lore, you have very specific, like even regional, like stuff from the Isle of Man or Nordic myth. I was just quality checking the second Felix Chance audiobook, and I was listening to my narrator talk about the Fjalsnasir, and she did a lovely job of pronouncing it. But they are basically Norwegian gnome hunters that patrol the 12 Nights of Christmas for things that go bump in the dark. And I was able to pull them into one of my Christmas stories. And they were really fun to play with the concept of those elf gnome creatures versus a drunk mall Santa thinking they're his elves, and just all the fun that ensues with that. Because you have these little gnome elf creatures with axes and that are like out there hunting the things that go bump in the night and are going to eat your face off. And this drunk Santa's like, "You betrayed me. Why are you not working? Why did you leave me at the North Pole? Blah, blah, blah." So, it's a very rich ground to pull small little things from and really make them big and make them your own.
Okay. Linton, do you have any closing thoughts?
I think everybody has spoken pretty well on myths and legends, and I think above all, we shouldn't forget that these are pieces of humanity being passed down, and that in any way that we use them or listen to them, we should not forget the people behind them, the people who passed them on, and how they reflect the past and the present and possibly even the future.
I think that's true when you're stealing from history too. But yeah,
Definitely.
Absolutely.
all right. Dave, closing thoughts?
I mean, I think we all pretty much hit all of the high points and some of the low points too, right? I think one thing to keep in mind with legend more than myth, but eventually one leads into the other, is writing something that's legend, trying to make a legend, is to find a way to make that character larger than life, because that's what sticks. Leonidas is remembered because he was larger than life. John Henry is remembered because he was larger than life. Davy Crockett was larger than life. Like it's finding that one or two little details and really blowing that up so that it sticks in the reader's mind.
It's like the that old meme that they used from the Avengers about people won't remember your name because you follow the rules.
Yeah, that's why no one will remember your name.
Right. You got to share the good memes if you want people to remember you in modern society. You got to share the good memes. All right, Jana, closing thoughts.
I think we've really touched on it. I just enjoy pulling that through because I do think it's such a fun way to appeal to an audience. And sometimes you can do a little bit of, education with your entertainment, and I never mind doing that neither.
Okay. That's always a good thing. We'd be learning stuff, yo. All right. So as we go around, we're going to let you tell us where you can. Oh, wait. I would be remiss if I didn't remind you to please be kind and speak your mind on the reviewing platforms. Your reviews help the right readers, viewers, and consumers find the right awesome speculative fiction products. So do your part and share your opinions on the reviewing platforms. And with that, we're just going to go around Robin. Dave, can you tell us where we can find you on the wild interwebs and what you're working on at the moment?
Great. So you can find me on all the usual places, plus TikTok. I finally figured out how to get on that abominable platform and try to be interesting. What I'm currently working on is book 2 of the Dirty Deeds trilogy, Dirty Deeds Tramps. Book 1 was, if Firefly and Burn Notice and Leverage got together and had a kid, that was Dirty Deeds Vagabonds. Dirty Deeds Tramps is if Ocean's 11 and Guns of Navarone got together and had a kid.
Lots of kids being had right here.
Well, there's other things they could have, but they're less appropriate. And this is sort of maybe not a G-rated audience, but
no, but we're family friendly.
Yeah, family friendly. So.
We try. All right, Jesse, what are you working on and where might we stalk you?
I'm working on my first full length. It's called Gravesinger. It is a expansion of my short story Dead Wolf for anybody that ended up reading that one in A Touch of Aether. The Kickstarter for that should be firing up near the mid to end of April. And then as far as where you can find me, you can find me at outlawauthor.com. That will take you to all of the usual socials, X, Instagram. I just started a TikTok. Hopefully I'll have a video up by the time anybody sees this. I got to figure out how I want to handle that platform. But yeah, I've got almost every social that people normally use, but you'll find the links for all of that at my website.
Outstanding. Miss S.L. Linton.
You can find me. I have a website, sllinton.com, where there's links to my socials, but I'm also on Substack at theforgottenlibrary.substack.com. I have a short story that's going to be included in the Chaos Theory Cryptid anthology by Bayonet Books that should be coming out end of March. So go over to Bayonet Books to learn more about that. And I am noodling around with an epic fantasy right now, and that's all I can say about it. So.
All right. Charlie.
You can find me at charliecox.net. Just be careful how you spell it. If you throw that E in there, I don't know where you're going to end up on the internet, and I take no responsibility for spelling errors. You can also find me on all the socials. And real quick, shout out to my buddy Dave Hensley and my buddy Jesse James Fain. They and me also, we all are finalists for the Imaginarium convention in July. Each of us have books that were nominated and made it to the finals. So I just want to give my buddies a shout out on that.
Who all did you say?
Dave Hensley, his book Ghost Ship Derelict was a finalist for Best Audiobook. Is that correct, Dave?
Mm-hmm.
I hear his co-author was a hack though, so you got to be careful.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, that was me and JR.
Oh, that was.
Yeah. And to be clear,
Yeah,
the Imaginarium. Go ahead.
The award is for Brian Fairbanks' narration, though.
Yeah.
Okay, but you guys wrote the thing that he narrated and acted, so let's, and then Jesse's was Best Anthology for Trailer Park, Double Wide, correct?
Yes.
Why you got to be right about my hometown like that, Jesse? Jeez.
Because I was right about mine, too. The story's literally dedicated to my grandfather and my great uncles.
I actually got kicked out of a psychology class in high school because we were doing word association. You were trying to teach you, like, if you think one thing, what's the first thing to come to your mind? And when they said trailer, I said trash, and they kicked me out. So I'm like, well, I mean, I know those people, though, so it doesn't count. But anyway. All right, James, where might we find you, and what are you working on at the moment?
All right, so on the Wild Wild Web, you can find me at halfacrepond.com. I will be updating it shortly, I swear. On the socials, J.E. Pittman Writes. On the Facebook, j.e.pittman, just about everywhere else. Yes, I do have a TikTok. No, there's nothing there. I just parked the name for the time being. As of the recording of this, I'm working on finishing up The Sundered Day, the second in the Saint Germain letters spinoff from Felix Chance. When this airs, I should hopefully have that out and be working on The Golden Fiddle, the third in this rapid release novella trilogy that explores the life of the Comte de Saint-Germain and the origins of Felix Chance before the release of a very special prequel novella on April 1st.
It's a fortuitous day to launch something.
Yeah, especially given the title of it.
I mean, yeah, I could see the corollaries there. All right, Jana, when you were not knitting and crocheting and needle pointing and doing all the domestic things, what are you working on, and how can we stalk you on the Wild Wild interwebs? See, I gave you all of them, so you have and quilting.
You did.
Also quilting. See?
And quilting, doing all the things. When I'm not doing all of the things, I am doing all of the other things. You can find me over at linktree, linktr.ee/Opal Kingdom Press, or you can go directly to the press at opalkingdompress.com. There you can find me, my many personalities, and the authors that I am now publishing in various places. Also, you can find me under these two pen names and several others all over the internet. I am the loser of internet hide and go seeks. So if you find those pen names and they're associated with publishing, they are almost always me. And what am I currently working on? By the time this comes out, I will be finalizing the Tentacles and Tides anthology, which comes out at the end of March. I will be still accepting on open call stories for Sand and Storm, which are desert creatures. And so that'll be lots of fun. And then I am working on the Diana McDonough stories. So the first book for that should be out here soon. I did the cover for Jesse James' Gravesinger. So when it comes out on Kickstarter, I'm very excited to see everything he's going to do with it because it turned out really, really cool. And I'm writing Reboot with You when I'm not doing anything else. And that is enough for the list right now, even though the list goes on and on and on. And what are you doing, JR?
So doing the same thing, doing the reboot, and doing the Wargate still. we talked about it in the pre-show, but I haven't talked to the listener. So was having issues with the brain fog, with the head injury. And so I talked to the neurologist because it was slowing me down. And before he would see an appointment to see if anything was going on, he's like, well, JR, you haven't had your eyes looked at since 2021 and you're over 40. So maybe it's time to see an eye doctor first before we start noodling around in that head of yours. And so I went to see an eye doctor, but my VA coverage, because when you get hurt in the military, the private insurance doesn't want anything to do with you. They're like, oh, that's, pre-existing condition because you got hurt in the Army. And so they kind of tell you to go back to the VA, and the VA supposedly covers that, but the guy retired in 2021 and they didn't hire anybody to the position. So yeah, it's a benefit without a service. And so I finally went into the economy and I hired a lady to be my eye doctor who happens to specialize in head trauma, which was incidental. That was not why I hired her. And she's like, hey, we've got this wonderful thing called prisms. We can put them in your glasses and it can fix your head. And I didn't know this was a thing, but apparently that predates my war experience and the Army just never told me. So I get those. They are in, as we record this, they arrived today. I've just got to set an appointment to go get them fitted. So hopefully I get my productivity up and start kicking out some books because I like writing, and it's frustrating when you have the stories to tell and you can't tell them. And then you start talking to the dogs and the cats, and they're not great readers, so they don't answer me. They don't tell me how awesome my ideas are in the comments. Rude, if you ask me. Yeah, Ranger, I'm talking to you. All right, with that out of the way, you can find us, dear listener, on our Linktree, linktr.ee, Linktree/Blasters and Blades Podcast. Again, Linktree/Blasters and Blades Podcast, where we link to all the coolest of things: our BitChute, Rumble, YouTube, TikTok, Twitters, Spotify, Discord. We've got our Blasters and Blades Facebook group and Facebook page. We've got our email, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. Again, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com for professional purposes only, people. Save the shenanigans from Adam Stabby Stab over there on the Instagram, the Twitter, and the email. You can support the show by going to buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Be sure to put in the comment section this for the podcast, and I promise I will keep my co-hosts duly caffeinated. They will drink that coffee brand coffee until they get high on their own supply. And if you want some of that coffee brand coffee, the link is in the show notes. The discount code is podcast grunts. You get 10% off. We get a little bit of a kickback. It's a win-win, people. And with that, I will tell you that our Discord has grown. We have a Pop and Meme channel, and it's not all me anymore. We've got actual listeners, not just other authors that should be writing. In there, popping out some pretty cool memes, giving some ideas for future podcasts, discussing the episodes. So if you are on Discord, I encourage you to join us. And just keep in mind that it's a family-friendly podcast, so we do sequester any non-family-friendly stuff in adult verified channels. So that way, if you want to share the funny jokes that are Army humor, that's not going to be seen to the general public on account of. And with that, I would like to thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For my crazy co-host, I am J.R. Handley, and this was the Blasters and Blades Podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time. We will indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom. And with that, I'm going to hit the end button. Thank you all for coming on. This was a lot of fun.